to the ambient noise of East London, I want to share very briefly with you an extraordinary description of the destructive and creative consequences of the sanctions we've imposed on Russia, not just for Russia, but for the world. And this is a brief passage written on his Facebook a few hours ago by Gleb Pavlovksy, who is as good as it gets in terms of holistically capturing the insanity of the Russian state. And I'm going to translate it for you live from Russian, but it's written in such an elusive way that the translation will be tricky. But this is better than anything I could give you in 2 minutes flat about the geopolitical consequences of the sanctions. So Pavlovsky writes, well, should I talk about the sanctions in my lecture tonight? Because after all, Putin is doing this butchery in Ukraine, and is it even decent to mention this? And he says, after all, I'm also meeting an ambassador of an EU state later. But nevertheless, here goes. The consequences of the punitive sanctions are very bad and even worse for Russia than they're being described. But the system of the Russian Federation arose precisely under extreme circumstances and has a capacity already built into it, a pattern of work with catastrophe, so as to endure the catastrophe. This system is very vulnerable to destructive influences from overseas, like the sanctions, but it can sort of dip into these very destructive influences and scoop out of them a kind of energy and a kind of anomalous life force. Currently, Russia is moving into a space where it'll reject all norms and rules and exploit the recognition of norms and rules by other states. And it will do everything it can to expand this space it swims in where rules and norms are rejected. And this dangerous sphere on the world stage will soon come to be populated by structures of survival, structures of creative survival that the Russian population will be habituating itself into. We can't underestimate the creativity of the Russian population under the sanctions. Its capacity to be inventive, not just in a positive but in a destructive sense, will have a vivid impact, not just on the future of Russia, but on the future of Europe. In the years of the new sanctions, we will see the most unusual forms of habituation to them by the Russian population. What will be the consequences of the extreme Western counter-reaction to the, he doesn't say this, but he thinks it's a brutal and an insane war that Putin has started. And what the Russians will do in response to this counter-reaction. Well, this will be about new and even more unexpected forms of conflict.